Welcome to the Rise and Form podcast.
Yeah.
Calming our amygdala,
Yes.
calming our bodies to talk about anxiety.
It's really good.
All right, we'll start.
Can you just do more of that?
Yeah, just sit with that. Let's just do that for the whole episode. Just sound machine.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Well, I'll get us started. Hello, listeners. Maybe I should start there.
Good.
I want to introduce you all to our guest for today. It is JD Peabody. He is founding pastor of New Day Church in Federal Way, Washington. He's a graduate of Fuller Seminary and Biola University. Whoop, whoop. And that is actually how we connected, is as alumni. And he has written for Worship Leader, First Thing, Christianity Today, which is kind of how we got connected, because he wrote an article about anxiety for Christianity Today and invited me to contribute to that, and theplow.com. For nearly 2 decades, he wrote in the context of advertising and public relations, and then he totally shifted his field and attended seminary, and helped to start building a new church and learning the discipline of writing for weekly sermon deadlines. I do not envy you on that. JD and his wife live in the rainy but beautiful Pacific Northwest, so we are all in good company up here in this quarter of the U.S. corner, maybe. But we're so glad to have you.
Well, thank you. It's such a privilege to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, it is a privilege to have you on as well, JD. And I'm just wondering, maybe you'd want to just tell us quickly about the Inklings as well, because we're not going to be really talking about that today. But
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I was writing the first book in that series the same time that I was writing the Perfectly Suited book about anxiety. So one book I describe as kind of being about my experience of anxiety, and the other one being my therapy, helping me through it. So one was kind of my place for my brain to just have fun. And so I wrote this middle grade children's fantasy series. The third in the trilogy is coming out in just a couple months. But in my mind, the two are connected.
Yes.
Even though from the outside they wouldn't seem like it.
Yeah. Wow.
That's cool.
One's your cognitive thoughts on anxiety, and one is your anxiety. Like one is your therapy
Well,
itself.
and really, so much of my story is connecting with my inner 10-year-old, and so I was really writing for my own inner 10-year-old.
I love that. I love when people take care of their inner child, but that's a whole nother topic. But I just love that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. That is another topic. We should get into that.
Yeah.
Well, we're doing this sort of focus today mostly on anxiety, and you've written on this, and I know you've been really public with your own background and story with anxiety and OCD. And so we're kind of doing something that seems like most anxious people wouldn't want to do, which is like talk on a podcast. And you're a pastor and you do all these things that I think are really inspirational for someone who battles with all of those struggles, and so this seems counterintuitive to but you're living that life. So I guess we're going to get into that, right? Like how you've been able to do that and push through things. And I got a sense from even listening to you on that other podcast just about how the OCD almost helps you in some ways to do the character development and all that. So that's interesting. But just to start with, we love this opening question, which is just to talk about a formative experience or moment in your life that profoundly transformed you.
Yeah. I don't know if it was profoundly or not, but a moment that comes to mind was I grew up in church. For the most part, it was a very small church, and most of my growing up, I was the only kid my age. And so my sister, who was 3 years older than me, they had things for her age, or kids that were her age. So, and we were at church a lot. So on a Wednesday night, my parents would go to prayer meeting. my sister had Pioneer Girls and her group. I didn't have anything, so I'd park in the church library and sit and read while everybody else had their thing. And I don't know how frequently, but that's my memory for my elementary years. And then just when I was between fourth and sixth grade, we got a youth pastor at the church, and I was watching as these older kids, this youth group is really becoming exciting, and I'm anticipating the day that I can finally join them. And this youth pastor was just kind of a little hero worship for me of just a really outgoing, charismatic guy that just seemed somebody that I'd really want to pay attention to me, And just as I got into sixth grade, he took another job, and I was just devastated at the thought that now this, the youth group felt like it was going to fall apart and all this, and as he was leaving and I was saying goodbye, he made the comment to me. He said, "You're going to be a tiger. I just know it." And it was just this throwaway comment. I'm sure he never even remembered saying it, but it was just an example of an adult paying attention to me, other than my parents, seeing me, recognizing me, and going, "There's something in you." I didn't even know what it meant to be a tiger, but it sounded cool, and so just the power of words and encouragement and affirmation, and so that was one little story that just has very simple thing that has just stuck with me.
Yeah.
Wow.
However many 45 years that's been.
Wow.
So yeah.
No, you look like a tiger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You are a tiger.
Little long in the tooth tiger now.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, what did that mean? What does it mean to you to be a tiger? Like, did that kind of translate at some point to you?
I think the idea of it's kind of ironic because there's a fearlessness to it that feels the opposite of anxiety, but also, sticking in there and battling with anxiety, staying in the fight with it. It is a bit of maybe some fierceness there to just be committed to working it out and finding that there is more strength there than you realize when you're in the thick of it, and it seems so completely overwhelming that you can't make it through. So maybe that's a tiger.
Yeah. I love that.
I think
No.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, just when you see people that might come across as shy or introverted or and never underestimate them.
Yeah.
Like I can hear you saying, like, you were that kid, you were kind of alone, and people wouldn't have known he's, can we say badass? Is that a thing?
We just did.
Yeah. I would. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and mighty with the pen in this way, right? As well, and with word, and that's cool. That's cool.
That makes me think of when you were writing in Perfectly Suited. You said something, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but it stood out to me. There was a few times you talked about, like, having to, like, it was somebody's quote, but having to, like, push through anxiety, and, like, something about, like, pushing through the dread or something like that. You use some kind of quote in there. And it's like, that is that you need fierceness to deal with anxiety, because a lot of it needs to be challenged, So it made me think of that.
I think that was a Kierkegaard quote.
Yes.
Where, just being able to stay in the same room as your dread and let it actually become your teacher and go, what is there for me in this? I thought that was really a good one.
I love that. I love that. Wow. And just a lot of your book was kind of like talking about, like, okay, so how do we do this, with the armor of God? And we'll get into that, I'm sure, as we go through. But to transition a little bit, you wrote an article about praying for your basal ganglia, but you also had a chapter in that book talking about that, and then in other writings you talk about anxiety. And so we were just kind of wondering, what was your definition of anxiety in general? Kind of what are you talking about when you're writing about it?
Yeah, and I'm not a clinician, so I don't know that my definition is a formal one. It's more just from my own experience
Yeah.
of
That's
it.
what we want. That's what we want.
Yeah, I
Better
would
than the clinical
say,
definition.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, anxiety feels that word dread is really part of it there. Generalized, usually that it's I'm feeling the dread, and it's not necessarily tied to a specific. I mean, there's usually a trigger or something, but it's broader than it's a little more undefined as to what it is I'm dreading is going to be the outcome. But with that dread is paired this sense of an urgent need for action on my part. So something is dreadfully wrong, and I must do something. And a lot of times I feel like I can't do something, and so that's this tension point. For me, being with OCD being sort of my form of anxiety, usually that's a compulsion that I have to do something in the face of it, or I feel like I'm gonna die, or it feels like it's just gonna crush me.
Yeah.
And so then when you kind of can stay in that place and come through it after a few times and go, oh, I didn't die,
Yes.
but I feel like the feeling of anxiety for me is kind of this. It's a little bit it's undefined, unspecified fear almost. That's kind of a cloud of it hanging over me with that dread and that impulse that I must do something.
Yeah, kind of
So,
diffuse, like, undifferentiated, just like, I don't know what it is, but
Yeah. It's like you use the word, I think you used the word like trapped, and definitely dread. Like it is this like very light trapped feeling. And I've used this metaphor before of like almost like a bully. It's like a bully, and it's like, it just like it's overwhelming. And a bully that we got to defeat and push again, and we can with support.
Yeah.
That feeling of dread. Just this morning with a client, I said, no, it's just like you've got to slow down. And they were like, yeah, that's what I can't do. I was like, I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot. You're literally telling me why you have anxiety. I said, yeah, just slow down. Like Anyway, so I like it was a nice thing to say, but it was not very validating.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the Bible verse, don't be anxious. When you're anxious, it's not the help. You're not wanting to be anxious.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah, it's good. It does tell you to do something instead, which is helpful, isn't it? It's like, do this instead, but don't quote just the first.
Right. I know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, this takes us to kind of, maybe we can all share a little bit of our own experiences of anxiety. And when we're talking about anxiety, I think, everyone has levels of anxiety, and that's healthy and normal, but maybe we can share an example of when it was higher than normal, a little bit more kind of not kind of congruent to the situation. I mean, I'm happy to go first.
Go for it.
Why not?
If we want to share, yeah. Other than at the beginning of this when the podcast stuff wasn't working, but what came to mind when Andrea and I were talking about this, I was like, wow, that's interesting. Maybe I got to do some work on this. But years ago when I was moving to America, my good friend said to me, be a yes person before you leave. Say yes to everything so you don't burn any bridges and leave well. And I thought, all right, I'll do that. That sounds like good advice. And so what starts happening is some really interesting stuff. I don't know if it's God or just kind of like the way energy works or something, but maybe it was just my own perspective. But I start getting asked to do these funny things, like meet up with an old friend that I hadn't seen in years that I would usually probably say no to, or I started playing on a Filipino basketball team, the only white guy that was allowed to be on the team,
You
because
just get more and
I
more
think
interesting, Abe. I just can't. Okay, keep going.
oh, it was a very interesting experience. I will have to come back to that one day.
Mm.
But the thing that was real for me is I had left my church, my old church, and I was going through a divorce, and I was struggling in my life, and I left that place almost like a divorce, like I'd never stepped back in there. And there was a Christmas concert coming up, I think. Um, and they said, we need a drummer. Can you come back and play drums? And I was like, I'd played drums there since I was a kid. So very familiar place. And I hadn't set foot there in like 2 years.
Wow.
And that anxiety was like so high. It was, and the fear or the dread, was that I'd be judged, or, that feel uncomfortable or something. And so it's like you were saying, Jeff, like it was really hard to describe why I was anxious, because I know that everyone there loves me. And not everyone. I mean, the people I knew, there's probably some people that don't love me, but my friends, my allies, I played basketball with them still. I still caught up with them for coffees, but walking into that building, and you can probably both tell me why I was anxious, but I ended up doing it and it was fine. I wasn't that good on the drums anymore. I was pretty bad actually, but yeah, so that's what kind of came up for me.
Yeah.
I was thinking of that.
Can I ask what that anxiety looked like for you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was ruminating thoughts like for weeks. Should I, shouldn't I, push pull, just feeling like bodily discomfort, a lot of, fast, rapid heart rate, a lot of physiological symptoms, and just overthinking. And then probably underneath that, like guilt, like I've done something really wrong. I've done something really bad, where I know I'm loved. I know I'm forgiven. I know I'm set free, but still walking through, all of that.
Yeah.
So kind of like I don't think I've ever faced my past. And that was like me kind of showing up and facing it.
Yeah.
And so I think it was about really, really looking at my past and walking into spaces that I thought I could run from. There you go. Now I'm telling you what it is.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Pull it out.
Pull it out.
Yeah.
Talking to a pastor and a therapist, and I'm meant to be interviewing.
Safe space. Safe.
No, it's good. I love it. I
Yeah,
know.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about for you, Jeff?
Yeah, I think-
Like what?
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting because I think being a pastor for me has itself been a huge source of anxiety. I think going into the role, when I did switch careers, there was a reason. I never intended to be in the pastorate, and I have a lot of baggage around the clerical authority and its misuse, and that goes back to my own childhood and my dad's childhood. I mean, it's deep in my bones, and so I had this real aversion to becoming a pastor, but then also this sense of that it was a calling, or what I was being drawn toward, but inherently in my body there was this tension of coming into this role, and so it never was it's never been an easy fit for me. I've gotten more comfortable in it over the years, but I was about 10 years in when I really hit what I call my mental and emotional wall in it, and all of a sudden I was just getting it was like I told people I felt like my brain broke. All of a sudden I was just getting flooded with intrusive thoughts, and it was dark, and I felt like I didn't know what was happening, and I'm still functioning on the outside, and but internally I am just a wreck, and I, I was pretty detached from my feelings most of my adult life, and so this is all happening, and I'm just suddenly I'm super emotional, and I go on a walk with a friend of mine who happens to be a therapist, and we're walking, and I'm just like blubbering, and it's just pouring out of me, and I'm just going on and on. And I get to the end of it, and I tell him, I said, I'm not an anxious person, and he just laughed as if I was not seeing what everybody else could see about me and how anxious I was, and how much I was carrying around that was evident, and that laugh really kind of pulled me up short, and made me kind of set me on my journey of going, oh wow, there really is so much going on in there, and I'm a deeply anxious person, and have had that so lots to work through after that, but that was really kind of
Wow.
the pinnacle moment, or deep valley moment, where it all came crumbling down for me. Yeah.
Wow. And what a good friend to just be able to be honest. It was probably safety there that he was able to
Yeah.
laugh, and you could hear
Yes.
that.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
also bravery on your side of being able to like acknowledge that we see parts of ourselves. When we see parts of ourselves, it could be so hard, and it's like, ugh, I don't want to see
Yeah.
that. I don't want to be that.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, God, yeah.
Well, which created its own anxiety too,
Mhm.
because it's like, no, this can't be going on. I've always been the guy who is all about doing the right thing. Like, I'm Mr. Responsibility, and when you can't even control your own brain,
Yes.
it was like feeling like I was running away from my mind, and
Yes.
that doesn't work
Yeah.
very well for very long,
Yeah. It
So
can be so
yeah.
overwhelming. And I think something you mentioned too in your book, I think at the end, is just like that this is who, like, we have these parts of ourselves, and God can do work. God is greater than that. Like, and I think it was like that, yes, this is the name of it, but God's name is greater. Something to that effect. And it's like that
Yeah.
encouragement of
Yeah.
like, we can call these things out in ourselves because of God, because we have someone that is greater, and it's actually better for us to know the name. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's good, Andrea. You must have read that book. You're dropping some JD Peabody today.
Hey, it's good.
Yeah.
We gotta read.
She could have.
Man, but that's
She
good.
could have said all that without the book. Yeah.
No, but
No, that's really good. That's, I mean, just that thought of it being honest, how the honest reflection of yourself actually helped you, and why.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, you talk about this in the book but why we hide from that, and then just how someone laughing at you was actually the intervention.
Yeah. Kind of. He probably doesn't like the story because it probably doesn't get him any clients, but it was a really good therapeutic approach. Try that with some of your some of your clients. Just laugh at them.
Yeah.
it's a paradoxical intervention, so it's like,
Yes.
sometimes it just
There
works.
you go.
Yeah.
All right, I'll throw my story
All right,
out
you're up,
there.
Andrea.
I know.
Yeah.
I was like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe I could sneak out of this. I was like, no, we're talking about being honest.
No way. Come on.
But this is like perfect timing because I just visited home last weekend, so I'm just ripe with this. So hopefully not too much comes out to where I'm like, "Ugh, don't listen to that episode." But I will say probably the biggest thing for me, that the biggest like fear thing is like messing up, doing something wrong, and not in the things, but in relationship. Like, did I do something to push this person away? Did I say something? Could I have done more? Like, these are all the thoughts that go in my head and that I've even had this weekend. And I mean, it definitely shows up like in my breathing, my heart, beating fast. Like I had to push away thoughts because I know my brain will go there, and I know that that's not true. But but it comes. Like thoughts are like little unruly toddlers. They come in and they're like, I want this. And, we love toddlers, but it's like, no, no, no. Like that's not going to be helpful for me. And I had to push it away. But, just this fear of like, I think I feel more responsibility than I need to in relationship. And just feeling that burden and like, just perseverating, just constantly thinking about it over and over again. Could I've done more? So that's kind of where my high anxiety comes in, is in relationship.
That sounds like my wife. She talks about her family vows. Growing up as a PK, like the thing that she felt was the worst thing she could do was somehow make somebody mad that they would leave church. And feeling so responsible for that, and kind of always scanning. So then to grow up and become a pastor's wife, feeling that responsibility, it just elevates all those old family things from being 15 come on back.
Gosh.
So yeah.
God is
that's
so funny.
We should talk about that a lot, because man, that's hard for you to navigate, hard for her to navigate. But that's really interesting.
Burden when you're holding all these people, you're in that leadership role, and it's like, it's a burden. It is.
Well, and that's where I feel like the way forward in that is vulnerability, because it feels like church, which should be the place where you are safest to be your truest self, is there's just this element to it where it's really easy to put on a show or feel like everybody else around you has it together, or it's going to somehow reflect on your faith if you are demonstrating anxiety or something's wrong with you. And so then it puts us in this mode of constantly being guarded, or put in a mask. And so to just own that for myself from up front as much as I can. And actually that's been my way through, even with my own healing, is to be transparent as much as I can and as appropriate in the church and that's actually just been, people connect far more with your weaknesses and your brokenness than they do with your example of how well you can do it right. And
unfortunately.
So but anyway, it's been like everything, God can redeem everything and make it into an opportunity to be powerful, actually. Like if you can actually go there and sit in the dread and let other people see you in it or meet you with it, then he can use that.
Yeah, we don't have to fake it. We can just, just have it out there. There's almost like a relief that can come from that, of like, okay, I don't have to pile a mask on top of this distress or burden that I'm carrying. And easier said than done, right? But it's ironic. It's like the very like antidote. I love that, what you said, Jeff. Like the antidote is to like really do the opposite of what is being pulled from you from that anxiety. Yeah. I like that. Maybe this is a good time to transition then, because you're talking about like how to get, to rise out of it in a way. And so I wanted to kind of ask a little bit about that, of like, okay, so we know what anxiety is. Like we all feel it to some degree, and we know that in our fallen human state and helplessness, like this is just, we're in it. It's going to happen. How do we rise out of anxiety? So you're kind of speaking to that a little bit, and maybe out of the survival brain, and start walking in the peace of God, to do the things that is said in the Bible, to have that peace that surpasses all understanding. Like how do we, and this is a big question. I know there's not one answer, but what things come to mind?
Yeah. I think you touched a little bit on when you talked about the naming piece. I think one of the things that was helpful for me to get out of my own anxiety. Well, and I'll be really clear. Like I'm still a work in progress. I'm not like I'm not healed and cured and beyond it.
Wait,
So
what?
so I this is more aspirational than actual. But I think one of the things that was pivotal for me was to move out of the idea of praying for the eradication of my anxiety. I think I wanted it to just be removed, and that was what I saw as being an answer, was if God took it away. And then I remember a quote from P.T. Forsyth that was saying it's a better thing to ask for prayer's conversion than, or not prayer, for pain's conversion rather than its removal. To let God take the pain and make it a source where a place where he can meet us, to turn it into something sacramental, and to go, okay, God can do that with anything, and it doesn't have to be gone for me to see his hand in it. And that was really freeing, to go, okay, God, whatever your will is with this thing, it's here. I can't make it go away, but you can do something with it if I'm offering it to you, and say your will be done with it. And then he can, I mean, he could do that anyway without me saying that, but I can be aware of it and go, so I think beginning to look for God to do something bigger than just take away our pain is a piece of getting out of it. I think the other thing for me was to go, and again, this is back to the naming thing, as I began to have a name to place to my pain, and even learning that sort of physical component, that it's rooted in the basal ganglia, and mine wasn't functioning well, and all of this, then that changed for me the way to read that verse about Jesus' name being above all names, because that's not just about personal names, that's about named things. And if I can name this thing, it's like Mr. Rogers saying, if it's mentionable, it's manageable. If I can name it, and then I can put it under the name of Jesus and say, okay, you are above all this, and so I'm putting it at your feet. And so that felt like downsizing it, so it was not the biggest name in the room anymore. And
those are that's great. That is absolutely great. Like asking God to convert it, and then it's a name below the name of God.
Yeah, that's good. The name below the name of God, that's really stands out too. That, yeah. And Andrea and I often asking, even in our questions here, we're like, what's a rise question? What's a form question? And there's always this overlap.
Yeah.
And you sort of named it there, of looking up to God. To that's the rise. That's all rising is. It's looking up, looking out, looking up. Just stop looking in, or looking at the book, or looking at the other thing that you're doing. Look up. And then you went straight to forming, like, transforming the thing rather than trying to remove it. Let's transform it, and that made you what? Yeah, maybe this is the kind of the question here in a different way, but what did that make you do differently?
Yeah. Well, one thing that that kind of comes out in the book, that I think what I realized in general behind a lot of my anxiety in life was a lot of what I was framing up as being faith in my discipleship was really more faith in myself and my capacity to do the right thing. And so even though I knew that I was saved by grace and the work of Jesus, it felt really like God really was more pleased with me because of my capacities to obey him, and that was really the source of my okayness with him. It was like almost like my view of discipleship was, you start out with the cross, but the more mature you are, the less you need the cross, instead of the other way around, and going, no, that actually the more mature you're getting, the more you're recognizing your need for the cross and everything. And so in a practical way going, when I thought about the armor of God, typically when I was growing up, you sing the songs about, I'm in the Lord's army and all this, and you have the little flannel graph or whatever about the
Yes.
armor of God and the different pieces and
Yes.
all of that, and really when you study that passage, then everything, all the emphasis is placed on taking up and putting on the armor. It's all about the human action. And I'm going, well, if that's the center of the power in the armor, then that's not protecting me. That's my protection is what I'm doing with it. And I'm going, that can't be the source of it. And if you really look at the Greek there for that part about taking it up and putting it on, one of the ways it could be translated is to sink into the armor. And I like that because that's much more like you sink into a couch or something. It's more putting yourself into something that's already there. And so I think when I think of rising, going, it's rising on the air current of God rather than me struggling and trying to climb up and claw my way up the mountain, going, there's this support underneath me. And our vision statement at our church is to live out of being loved by God. And the thought was really to try to say, how do we not have this be a vision that's us striving to make something happen, but instead to rest in what he's already done for us. And that to me is the best source of kind of letting go of the anxieties, going, he has us, and the Lord is able to make him stand because, or forget what that verse is in Romans, who are you to criticize the Lord's servant? The Lord's able to make him stand.
We'll put it up.
We'll totally butchering that, but yeah. Anyway,
it's fine.
It's good. Yeah, that thought about, I was picturing you doing something different, like the rising up part sounds like this, like, now I've got this, but it's actually like more about sort of surrendering to like, I have this already done, the battle's already won. I just need to like sink into it. Like, I really like that thought, sinking into the armor.
Well, and if you look at the armor in the Old Testament, it's God's armor that he's kind of loaning to us, like God's the one who puts on the armor to go out and bring salvation, and you're going, yeah, he's wrapping us in his own care rather than us somehow kind of doing all the heavy lifting and weight bearing ourselves. So
no,
that's good.
That's really good.
That speaks to me. I think that's something I slip into a lot and trying to get better. I feel like being at Biola started to open my eyes to things, but like how much self-sufficiency shows up and how that can get in the way of, that can heighten anxiety because we're taking on things that are too big for us, and how we forget God in those moments. And so I think that's a really good reminder and a reframe of like, how are you looking at this situation? What do you think your job is in this? And maybe if we can shift that, that's something that will help us we shift it by when we look to God, like when we say, oh yeah, you're powerful, and then he can shape us from there.
Yeah, I talk in the book about what I call the armor of me, which is all the things that I do for my own feelings defenses, whether that's relying on humor or avoidance or, defensiveness, perfectionism, all these things that I pick up to protect myself. Yes. And the thing is, you can't wear two kinds of armor at the same time, so in order to pick up God's protection of me, I have to lay down my self-protection and be willing to switch. And that's really hard. I do think that's where a lot of, at least my anxiety comes from, is trying to hold up all these self-protection things.
Just thinking of David, like I'm imagining that would have been hard work for him to like wear the armor in that story, and instead he put on God's armor, which was no physical armor. I
Right,
read that to my
right.
son the other day, and he thought it was the coolest. He's 3.5. He was like, "So he
Yeah.
threw that rock and it killed him dead." And I'm like, "Yeah, it did." I don't know if we can talk about that, but yeah,
Bible gets real.
Right, right.
yeah. But yeah, that's like it's really good. Just the thought, and it's funny, Andrea, we just keep getting told to trust God.
I
It's
know.
like, what's the
Just,
message? It's like,
just
stop trusting yourself.
yeah.
It's so like, it seems simple. Maybe it is. I don't know.
Yeah.
Seems simple.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we think we're trusting all the time, and we're really trusting ourselves far more of the time than we think, And it's just astonishing how much happens in church culture in particular, where it just feels like really we're encouraging people to rely on an experience or their own behavior or their service or intensifying their prayers, or it's all hooked into our own efforts so often. And we like to say we're not works based or legalistic or anything, but really at the end of the day we do just roll right back all the time into being responsible for ourselves. We just can't quite let go of that very easily.
Yeah, we got to keep taking that old man off, keep putting the old man on, or it's not don't put the old man on. Don't do that. But put on the new man. We have to keep continue to do that. And that passage, I forget where that passage is. But speaking of passages, and I'm wondering if there is a passage that you like, Jeff, that best encapsulates how God wants us to deal with our anxiety.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I think a couple verses come to mind for me. One is, and it's one of Peter's letters, and I should know the actual reference because I go to it all the time. But it's just
fine.
It's real.
Cast all your cares on him because he cares for you. I feel like that is going. There's a place to put your cares and anxieties. It's not like you have to focus on not having them, but to turn them over to God and know that he cares for you, and so he's gonna do what needs to be done with that anxiety. And so that idea of not trying to not be anxious, but instead to just offer it to God again and again, I think that's one thing. And the other thing that comes to mind is out of Romans 7, just where Paul is saying, I keep trying to do good and evil's right there with me, and I'm every time I'm trying to do the right thing, I'm this other thing is there too, and what's going to save me from this? Thanks be to God in Jesus Christ, our Lord. And kind of that hope of going when you feel absolutely trapped in that anxiety and you cannot seem to eliminate it from your own brain and heart, and you go, who's going to save me from this? Praise God, Jesus. Again and again, I love that Paul was that open there with us to give us that kind of permission to go, there are times when it just feels like we can't dig it out. And so what then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like something clicks, I don't know, at some point in our lives, or hopefully sooner rather than later, but like that dependence thing, just another client telling me that they were feeling really anxious because their kid wasn't doing what they were meant to do, and they're really struggling with their own anxiety and stress. And then just that thing clicked, and they just prayed instead of just get frustrated and just try to do deep breathing, which is all good stuff. But they just kind of, God help me.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you about it. Thank you that you're there. And it's like, we know to do that, but what is that? Like that, is that what happens that makes us get to that point where we're just like, is it a deep knowledge that he does care, that he is there, or?
I think it has to be the work of the Spirit to soften us up and give us that heart of flesh again to actually melt with him, and to, I mean, especially if people had tough family of origin stories and they don't know what it's like to have somebody that's actually loving them unconditionally or whatever. It's really hard to trust that that is true
Yes.
of God, so I feel like even there, when that trust isn't natural to us, that's what God promising that he can do that for our hearts, like he can get us there. I mean, there's still parts of me that super hard to accept the love of God, to just receive it and trust it and believe it, and but I praise God, he keeps working on us, and so
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Just kind of, yeah. No, you go, Andrea. You go. I'm gonna
I was gonna
just say
be
fluff. Do you have to go, Jeff, or can we squeeze one more question in?
Oh yeah, totally. I'm good.
Because I was really interested in, Andrea, this is your question kind of really, but about the avoidance, self-protection part. So just wondering if we can riff on that for a moment.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, in the book you talked about, like, and you're talking even now about like how we protect ourselves, and it has this element of like hiding in it, and so just like saying more about that, and just just all these ways.
Yeah. I think it's, especially speaking to church culture, it feels like there is almost a pressure or a desire. I think there's two things. I think there's a desire to do the right thing, and if it feels like Scripture is telling us not to worry or not to be anxious, that we don't want to disobey. So there is this sense of, I need to get over this, or I need to not have this going on in my life because I want to be obedient. And then there's the other piece of going, well, if people saw this about me, they would think that something is off in my faith, or I don't have enough faith, or they're going to judge me. So we tend to then work to either convince ourselves, minimize whatever's going on, to say it's not really there, or downplay it, or at least not let it be seen, and so we hide, we avoid it, or we don't. Nobody likes pain. I mean, obviously, it feels like half of our existence is to avoid pain or stop pain in some way, and so when we don't, it feels counterintuitive to say what we said earlier about, facing dread, going in and being with it. So we don't want to look at it. And yet I think that really the way through is through, and again, back to Jesus in the garden, and the anxiety that he felt there approaching the cross, and going, the wrestling with God, and coming, just getting to that point of saying, your will in this, God. And I feel like I'm moving off track from what the initial question was, but
flow.
Spot on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just I think, at least in my own experience, I feel like God offering armor as an alternative for myself, to my self-protection, really requires me then to get vulnerable, and so how to stay in that place. I feel like that's the battle all the time, is going, I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't want people to see what's really going on in me, because if they did, they wouldn't like me. They'd reject me, or they'd whatever. And so
Oh man, so
it
good.
brings up all kinds of things. But if we can move past that and go, no, actually the vulnerability is the very thing that is needed right now. And it's so freeing when we can get there.
Right. Just rest in that. And one thing I think of too is like, I know that there's more people around there that are willing to lean into vulnerability, but we don't see that, and it's scary to be the one that steps out in doing that. But sometimes and at some point we want to be able to create a community too, even within like Rise and Form of like where people can find people that are like, I'm going to to try to lean into this stuff. I'm gonna do it differently than what my default wants to do. And I think that can help because you're right, Jeff. It's like it's leaning it's doing the hard thing. It's doing the scary thing.
Yeah.
The vulnerable thing.
Yeah.
Well, and I will say too that you brought up a good point that it is important to have it be with people who are safe. You don't want to be vulnerable in a context that's not healthy, where you're oversharing or anything like that. But I do think just in general, it almost needs to be modeled for people to see it and know the difference. And really, I mean, I was so anxious. The first sermon that I was going to preach about kind of where I was at, tell the congregation everything, not everything, but like let them in on what I've been struggling with for months and months at that point. And I was really hesitant to do it. And I, to this day, I think it's the sermon that I've had the most feedback of people saying, oh man, that's right where I'm at, or I totally relate to that, which when you're in that moment, you feel like you're the only one who's feeling what you're feeling like. And so if you, so that was kind of the start. But then once you've done it, then you're kind of like, well, what is it that what's the big threat here, you know? And then all of a sudden you go, oh, there's actually this, it's back to the tiger going, that's where the tiger is. That's
There
where the
he
power is when you feel like,
Totally.
when can live in that space, and it's just so much more free. And I wouldn't go back, even though it's all out there. I'd go, well, yeah,
You can't
better,
control
though,
it, right? Like the impression management side of it. It's like if you have a different impression of me, what am I going to do about that? I can't do anything. So
right.
Power to you. But at the same time, that toxic masculinity, and I think I was absolutely a product of, a lot of that way of thinking. Like, I think, there's a lot of room for good, strong men, right? Masculinity in general. But just that thing of like, you talk about vulnerability to like, a man's man, and it's like, that just sounds like absolute just weakness. And it's like, it is, do you not, God, I'll get on my soapbox, but do you not understand how that is tiger-like behavior? That's so brave. It is so courageous to do that because you're doing the opposite of being scared and hiding. You're taking your armor off and seeing what happens, like David, right? Which, so yeah, how much more so for a pastor to be in front of a congregation doing that too, where you could lose people, you could get emails, whatever, which I'm sure you get all of that stuff all the time. And it's like,
right.
Yeah.
I think it's the way through, and I think also going, really when the goal is not necessarily to move anxiety out of the picture completely. If it can move from being in the driver's seat to being in the passenger seat, or maybe in the back seat, and then you can go, I see you, I know you're, but God's in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
I realized that what I needed was not to have my anxiety removed, but to have the power of my anxiety removed, and to just have it shrink down in size. And so, and vulnerability is ironically the way forward in that, to help it do that.
Yeah. That's significance. Love that. All right.
Yeah, we better finish here, huh? I was like, what you just said then, I was like, man,
I know,
that's
I'm like,
everything. And you just said something very important. But yeah, we'll, Jeff, just, given sitting with you, you're the opposite feeling of anxiety. You maybe because you know it so well, you create a space that's so just warm and soothing and comfortable. And I just like you. I like sitting with you, connecting with you.
Same. And maybe that white noise in the background has helped create that calm. But thank you. I appreciate it. It's great to be able to just have this conversation with you guys. And
thank you very much. And all the best for book 3 when it comes out.
Thank you.
It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah.